Michael Chandler taking on Tony Ferguson. As I said earlier in the week, this might be, again, the title fights are incredible, but my level of intrigue, like curiosity, like, ooh, what's this all going to mean? It's a little bit more for this one. So I want to start the conversation with you this way. I'm going to ask you this question. How reputationally costly is a loss here for either Chandler or Ferguson? And then the second part of that is, I guess I would ask, who has more to lose here? And I'm going to set it up in this way. We all know the struggles that Tony has had. Now, Chandler has not exactly struggled. He's 1-2. He had a great win over Hooker, and he nearly beat Charles Oliveira, and then he lost to Justin Gaethje in a very competitive, but, ultimately it was a fight that he couldn't get it done. Still, if you have the 1 and then the 3, especially if Ferguson coming off of these losses, what does it say about where Chandler is ultimately? How do you assess these questions?
These questions are a lot more harder to answer than they seem on the surface, right? And it's like, first and foremost, Luke, I'm not excited about this fight. I never liked the matchmaking.
Really?
I don't think they're on the same levels. I look back on this run of punishment that Ferguson's facing, how he's getting worse each fight. It's not just, oh man, put on an awesome action performance, but came up empty, nothing to doubt there. No, it's like one damaging, almost one-sided loss after another for the most part. I think Chandler is I think Chandler's too close to the title picture still to necessarily need this fight, although in the long run, this could be UFC if they believe the same way I feel about this fight. This could be them just sort of cashing Ferguson out one more time in a huge action fight and pumping Chandler back up. Now, that's me assuming, Luke, that this will be one-sided and that, it's almost a waste of a Chandler date. I know you don't agree with that. I know, in fact, you've been saying that, your interest is growing. So I almost have to interrupt your question to me, spin it back on you and be like, how do you have confidence that Tony can turn back the clock? Because to answer your question, how bad of a loss would this be to Chandler? I actually don't think it would be that bad, because if Tony Ferguson turned back the clock, he's so freaking beloved on almost a Diaz brother level that I think that would be the prevailing story, and we would just go, hey, well, at least Chandler gave us another action fight. But on the flip side, I also think Chandler's playing with house money, and those 2 losses, including one where he had the champion Oliveira almost out, I don't think it really hurts him. I think those are like moral wins. So yeah, Chandler has more to gain to get back in the title picture, but Luke, I love Tony too much to watch him take this beating that he's going to get on Saturday. And that's me being emotional. But, talk me off that. Tell me why you think Tony comes back and finds a way to be in this fight.
Well, we're not doing predictions yet, but I'll say this. I'm not super optimistic about his chances here. I mean, let's remind folks, he's 38 years old. Did you see the UFC 274 countdown show?
Not yet.
So he's got like Tony now has gray in his beard. It's a little bit strange to see because we've always, we always know he's a little bit older relative to some of his peers, but he had such a youthful exuberance and he was kind of all over the place. And now you can see like getting close to 40, a lot of that is changing. Dude, I'm just going to say it straight up. 38 years old, I don't care how good you are, is a very difficult place to be at 155 pounds. That is not winning conditions, flat out. And if people want to bury him after losing to Gaethje, Oliveira, and Dariush, I understand. I would say if you add in Chandler to that, then that to me would be the, again, you could decide now that there's full-on confirmation that he can't get back what he lost, and that could be true. I'm just saying if you lose to Chandler, then it's 100% sure. The thing I want to point out is 2 things. One, the reason why I'm not ready to 100% say it's, this is the end of the road is because I have done that with other fighters, granted different divisions, different circumstances, and then they have proven to be resilient, and not just Andrei Arlovski, there's been some other ones too, where in MMA, you do need to be a little bit careful about saying a guy's day is over before you really have clear, definitive proof. That's the first thing I would say. I think the other thing I would say here is, BC, and I want to be very clear with the audience too, dude, people need to understand this. Everyone's like, oh, Tony needs to change his training or do this or do that. You need to understand, and folks say they understand it, but they need to absorb what it means. This is an extremely violent sport, and you can take a loss here, not just this fight, but any fight, where it can change you. It can change you as a person. It can change your risk-reward calculus. It can change how you view yourself in the sport. It can change your desire to compete, and you can be even in denial about it while the changes have already happened. Josh Thompson, in fact, talking about his loss to Tony Ferguson, how it changed him, and it only took a little while before he was really able to fully accept what that meant, and then once he did, he understood what his body was telling him. Dude, he may have been changed against Justin Gaethje. That was an absolutely brutal brutal beating. And I always bring this example up because it's the one I go back to. When Rich Franklin beat the shit out of David Loiseau, he was not ever the same. He stayed in MMA and he did get some wins later on, but they were on the regional level or not guys not nearly as good. Like the elite side of him, it was beaten out of him that night by Rich Franklin. Like no doubt about it. And Loiseau, for folks who don't know, David Loiseau was fucking awesome, man. He was so good. His win over Evan Tanner is one of the most incredibly brutal displays of elbow slashing against a standing opponent you will ever see. There was a waterfall of blood coming off of Evan Tanner's face, but then he locked horns with Rich Franklin, and Rich Franklin took that all away. You need to at least ask the question, begin to accept the reality of Chandler goes in there and just dummies him a little bit, which, who knows what will happen. But if he does, there is no denying he got changed that night in Jacksonville, and there was no coming back from it. For me,
I think it goes deeper.
What I want to see is if that was true.
I actually think it goes deeper, which is why I have this much confidence in almost saying that it's over. Maybe you should have him be fighting a Robbie Lawler or a Cowboy Cerrone type than Michael Chandler. And Luke, it's because of this. Dude, I think that stretch of the tail end of almost getting into the title fight with Khabib and then losing it last minute. Dude, when he hurt his knee, right, slipping on the cables in the Fox studio ahead of what would have been UFC 223 and finally fighting, Khabib, he rushed himself back from a serious injury in such absurdly fast time frame and, went through a war against Anthony Pettis and just did everything that was mentally and physically and spiritually possible to just act as if, I'm assuming that the pain was never there and it never happened and the damage wasn't there, so that he could double and triple down and go all in and say, this is my window. I will not miss it. And I think that it's not just enough to say, was that beating he took over 4+ rounds, nearly 5 against Gaethje, enough to change a career? I think he was already running on fumes heading into that to try to preserve himself for that one big opportunity that kept missing out and slipping away. And you add into that, Luke, I'm no psychologist. I don't know the real story, but, he's going through a very public, at that time, thing with his wife and the abuse allegedly and the time he's broken from his family. He had some
mental health issues, yeah.
Mental health issues that I don't know if all of that was unresolved either. So he was running hard and heavy, you have to assume, and then poured it all out against Gaethje and then lost 2 more 3-round fights after that against absolute hammers in which he took damage and it really wasn't all that competitive as we kept going. Dariush moments, but really not, Luke. Dude, Chandler's the wrong guy. You can talk yourself into the idea of, okay, Chandler's great, but you can get him into a war easy. That's going to be my chance. I don't want to see Tony in a war against him. So it's hard for me to sit here and complain about Tony Ferguson versus Michael Chandler under any given year. Because it's not like Chandler's a perfect fighter. He makes himself too vulnerable because he tries to win. But this ain't it, Luke. This ain't the fight. This is not the time. I got bad feelings, and that's really muting me getting any level of excitement over this. To be clear, I feel the same way about Chimaev versus Nate. Not as starkly because Nate's got more in the tank.
I don't feel the same way about Chimaev versus Nate.
Nate's got more in the tank, but it's in the same category of what produces these feelings, whether you want to call me care too much about these fighters. All we do is cheer for them to go in there and get effed up for our entertainment. But you tend to care too much about some of these guys, and I got a bad feeling, Luke.